Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. Join us each week or when you can. We enjoy exploring wellness concepts and reminding you to make time for wellness.
This is episode 101.
Welcome to a new week with the Let's Be Well Together podcast. It's Elise Seifert, and today I'm joined with John Webster.
Hi, Elise.
Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
I would like to talk about a social media post I found from the Waterloo Region Suicide Prevention Council, and it's talking about how to encourage loved ones when they're struggling. It's in a certain context, but I think this applies to all kinds of stuff because it talks about the difference between pushing statements and encouraging statements. Let's go to the slide that compares, and this is comparing what the pushing statements are trying to do and what encouraging statements are trying to do. And if you read the pushing statement, I'll read the encouraging statement version.
Perfect. So the first pushing statement is, feels like a command rather than a suggestion.
An encouraging statement would feel like a suggestion, not a command.
A pushing statement often uses shame or blame and feels dismissive or abrupt.
An encouraging one shows empathy and concern.
A pushing statement is often generic statements or advice.
An encouraging one feels supportive and invites further conversation.
A pushing statement may push the other person away and discourage them from reaching out to you again.
When you make an encouraging statement, try to reflect on the skills, hobbies, and likes of the other person. And then there's another slide which shows examples of pushing statements versus encouraging statements. So I'll do the pushing one and you can show a version that's encouraging. Just go for a walk. It will clear your head.
Instead, you could say, do you want to go for a walk in the park? I know that's one of your favorite places.
A pushing type statement could say, you clearly need help. You need to go to a counselor.
An encouraging statement would be, I know it can be uncomfortable, but I think it could help if you talk to a counselor. Would you like help finding some options?
A pushing statement could be, no wonder you don't feel good. You just stayed up so late. Just go to bed earlier tonight.
And an encouraging statement could be, it can be hard to find a sleep routine that works best. Do you want to work together and think of some things that might help tonight?
Essentially, all these things, it's not surprising that we're hearing this kind of comparison. It's very similar to what you see in the Mental Health Commission of Canada and the whole concept of active listening. So we're going to keep coming back to active listening over and over and over again. But the point is, first of all, when somebody's talking to you, in my experience, you've got to be listening to what they're saying to you, not waiting to say something to them.
And I really like these examples because sometimes I feel like I don't know what to say to them, but I like that they all kind of end with questions that can help guide the person who's struggling. So I think that's something that's really nice.
In our first couple episodes, we interviewed Beth, and she said something right from the start that we've been repeating as well. She was telling me what people had done when she needed some help, and some of it wasn't that useful. So I said, well, what do you think we should do? Because like you, I'm not sure what to do in some scenarios. And she said, it's always a good idea to ask the person what they think they need. A lot of the encouraging statements are saying, I'm hearing what you're saying, and I want to be able to help. How can I do that? In this case, actually, I thought some of the encouraging ones were actually giving ideas instead of asking what they want, but at least they're making that effort.
Yes, and also I just worry, would I be equipped to help them solve these problems in that way? So maybe just asking, what is it that you need, or what do you need from me at this time? Because sometimes people just need to talk. They just need to talk out their problems, or maybe they just need to vent.
That's absolutely right. I mean, it's hard to know because the way this is set up, I mean, it's from the Suicide Prevention Council. So I think they're trying to talk about situations where someone is, when they say when someone's struggling, it's probably getting closer to a crisis type event. So that's always a tough call too, but I think that's right. Like first listen and hear, be active, try and hear what they're saying. But if you're sensing that there's any kind of crisis and you think that they need help from someone else, I'm with you. Like I'm not a qualified person to provide that help. So I think what I would be trying to do is saying, let's work on this together. Can I help connect you with somebody? Can I actually go to the computer right now and find out if there's somebody who you can call right now and see if we can encourage them that way? And because don't forget too, like some of the pushing statements were, go get help. But you're not offering to be part of that solution.
Yes, and I'm sure that's exactly what a person who is struggling would need. And I also like that the encouraging statements kind of remove the judgment from the pushing statements. So for example, in the pushing statement, it said that, well, you're just not trying to go to sleep. But instead of judging them for their sleeping patterns, you talk about how difficult it might be, and then how can we help to find a pattern that works best for you.
Yeah, like why can you assume that they're not sleeping because they didn't go to bed? Maybe they were lying in bed for 3 hours and couldn't sleep.
Definitely.
One of the encouraging statements talked about the fact that you're recognizing it will be uncomfortable for you to go to a counselor or some other kind of help. And that's a really big issue too. And I think maybe that's the better use of our time. We know this person, we're being empathetic, hopefully. And how can we connect with them in ways that we know to help them appreciate that they could use some help? Because in my experience, I also find that when people are going through these crises, they actually don't believe they deserve anything, right? So they don't believe they deserve help. And they'll say they don't need help, but a lot of times they're saying they don't deserve it. I think another thing to do is to be explaining why you think it's a good idea for their sake.
Right.
You know, trying to bring them to that concept as opposed to persuade them to do something on their own.
Yes. And I also love how it's a group effort too in the encouraging statements. So maybe they don't know where to seek the help or what resources they may have available to them. So that's another important feature, because I do think sometimes people think they don't deserve it, but also they don't know how to find it, especially if they're in a position where they're struggling.
And if you're not saying go do it, and you're saying let me be part of that picture, maybe it makes it just that much easier that they'll say, okay, I got this. I've said to people too, they'll be resisting some concept of seeing somebody or getting some help because there's still a lot of stigma, right? So people think if it's anything to do with my mind, then it's a mental health problem. If it's anything to do with a mental health problem, then it's embarrassing. And so you can say to a person, I said, look, if you had a broken arm, would you let me take you to the hospital?
Of course.
Right. Okay, well, if you had another physical injury, would you let me take you to a doctor to fix it? And they would say yes. But here you have something that you have an ailment, that you're suffering through something. It's not your fault. Can't we go see somebody who can help you? And there's at least a chance. But I think your point is right, that you're trying to make yourself a team and you're trying to bring that understanding, but you're trying to bring them to the understanding as opposed to just telling them what their answer is.
Yes.
Okay, well, that was a bit of a short one, but I think it's a really important one, and I'm glad I saw that post. Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. Today's interview is in the categories of social and mental wellness. Losing a partner, becoming widowed, creates challenges and impacts our wellness. And losing a partner when you have young children creates even more. Today we interview Marny Williams-Balodis, who founded the Hummingbird Centre for Hope. Welcome, Marny.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
So in 2002, Marny became a widow at the age of 30. She was the only parent of 2 children, a 3-year-old son and a 3-month-old daughter. The death of her husband touched and changed every aspect of her world and left her unprepared for the overwhelming journey she was embarking on. Through her experience, Marny developed a passion for supporting those in grief. She's volunteered with many bereavement organizations and has facilitated support groups for the past 19 years. Her biggest accomplishment is co-founding the Hummingbird Centre for Hope, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to build a community of support to widowed parents who are caring for their young families. So Marny, please tell us a little bit about your story, becoming widowed at a young age with young children.
Right. So it seems like eons ago, and yet just yesterday as well, my husband was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And from the word go, we were told that he had 3 to 6 months to live. We worked to get him as much treatment as we possibly could, but the cancer certainly had a different path. And within 6 weeks, he had died because the cancer had just taken over. And at that time, I was a parent to a 3-year-old son, and my daughter turned 3 months just after he died. So it was a bit of a whirlwind situation for sure. And I always kind of kid now that being hormonal with a new baby and grieving at the same time, it really isn't a good mix. So somehow we made it through, and here we are.
What were examples of the challenges you faced raising children while dealing with grief and probably executor type work and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think, obviously being solo parent and certainly to a newborn, that not having that second parent there to tag team off of, or you take this kid and I'll take this kid, or, you get up in the middle of the night versus me getting up in the middle of the night. Everything was on my shoulders. So when it came to parenting, driving, changing diapers, whatever it was, I had to do it all. So it was very exhausting and very overwhelming. And the other thing that happens, with the executor type work, I was in such a fog. My brain, wasn't working between baby brain and grief brain. There wasn't much ability to do these really hard tasks. And yet the world is asking me to do this executor type work and to be, on par and to understand these terminologies and these things that I have to do that I've never done before. Doing that while traipsing around two kids, because babysitters were few and far between that. It's just so overwhelming. And it was nothing that I thought, grief was nothing that I thought it was going to be. And, just spent the days being exhausted and just sort of getting through and taking care of the kids first and me last.
On the grief side, maybe you didn't have an expectation that you had thought of, but when you say it wasn't what you expected, what are some of the things you mean by that?
Well, I kind of giggle at that because I have no idea what I really expected. I knew I would be sad and I would cry, right? I figured that was going to be what my grief journey was. I never really thought what would happen after that. But what I very quickly realized is that tears is just a small portion of it. Very quickly, I was aware that grief touches every aspect of my life, whether it came to, again, taking care of the kids or taking care of the house or doing those executor works, taking care of the dog, who, walking the dog was now solely my responsibility. But the grief was just that overwhelm and that exhaustion. I didn't have a clue what I was walking into. Again, I just thought I would cry. And then I don't know when I would have stopped, but that's just sort of what I thought it would look like. So no knowledge on that part from my end of what grief was or how it worked or how it impacted people.
I've spoken with other people who weren't even in that situation, but just parents with kids and busy and whatnot. And what a lot of them said was that they don't even really think about themselves. They don't have time to. It's kids first. So I take it with everything going on, what happened with you thinking about you taking care of you?
Yeah, I certainly didn't make the top 10 list. It was making sure that the kids, because they were young, there's benefits and disadvantages to that, right? But getting them to preschool, getting them to that part of it, making sure they were fed. Even some days that was a challenge, right? That I didn't have any energy to focus on myself at the end of the day. The one thing I did do, which I had other parents kind of giggle at me, is my kids went to bed at 7:00, and that was a hard stop, and there was no fighting it. Like, you got to go to bed, and my joke was that you don't come out unless your arm's amputated, kind of thing. Because if I didn't get that evening to myself to do anything from switching laundry or to even just sitting on the couch and staring at the TV, I woke up the next morning grumpy. And when mommy's grumpy first thing in the morning, the day's shot. We have no hope for how the day is going to fold. So that was, I guess, the one little piece that I did put in for myself. But I focused on the kids because I didn't know how the death of their dad was going to impact them. And I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything I possibly could to lessen that impact.
When we were setting this up, you talked about feeling isolated. And I'm wondering, is that kind of self-imposed, or is that just because you didn't have resources? How did you end up feeling isolated, and what was that experience like?
Well, 21 years ago, the internet wasn't what it was. Facebook was a non-existent thing. So that finding those supports at that point, there wasn't the ability that there is nowadays. I did find a group, but there wasn't really anybody in my community, certainly in my immediate network, that was a widowed parent. And all the other parents had kids the same age as my kids and had their husband, and they didn't. It was almost like they were afraid to be around me, because if it happened to me, it meant it could happen to them. So that isolated it as well, that people didn't want to, I was contagious in some weird way, right? Which obviously isn't, but I was a reality for them they weren't interested in being a part of. So lost some friendships and some that just those connections as a single parent, right? It was very isolating for sure. I wish the internet was around back then. It would have been awesome.
So it sounds like it was difficult to find supports. Was there ever a point where you started to feel like you were catching up and addressing things better?
Yeah, I sort of had a pivotal moment. So this all happened in Calgary. This is where we lived when my husband died. And 2 years after that, I moved back to Ontario because this was where our families were. The grandparents were here. My siblings, his siblings all lived in Ontario. So it was the best thing I did to move back. And it was probably, 4 or 5 months after I moved back when I had this sort of epiphany of look what I've done. I've survived the 2 years. I moved my family across Ontario by myself. I renovated my kitchen at that point with help of family. And I sort of sat back and went, holy cow, like, look what I've done. And that was sort of a moment where I was like, okay, the kids are good. We're in a bit of a stable spot. Now it's about me. And that's when I shifted the focus to what did I want now? Like, what did I want my future to look like? But like I said, that was about 2.5 years after Keith died. So it takes a while.
You also said when you were setting things up that seems to be common for lots of people, that it takes that couple of years to get past the initial phase.
Yeah, I find that. So like, as you said, I've been supporting people for many years. And when we do have the kids in as part of our family and of our grief, that support, typically the parents go right to the kids first. They put all their energy into that. And also that first year of grief is it's kind of like going through the motions, zombie-like, or, in that fog. And then the second year is about building a little bit more stability. That it's often, I hate to put timelines and dates on grief, but there's a bit of a pattern where, a year and a half, 2 years kind of thing down the road, I see the parents getting this little different interest or different energy to support themselves and what do they want their future to look like. So yeah, it's a bit of a pattern.
And then what got you thinking about what eventually became the Hummingbird Centre for Hope?
Ultimately, Hummingbird is everything that I wish I had when in my early grief. And my co-founder Beth and I, when we met up, became friends. She was missing the same kind of things that I was. Her grief is, her husband died, I think, about 5 years after mine, but we were desperate to find that community of other people that understood us, that could relate to being a widowed parent on a different way than other people could. And so it was basically founded on what we were missing, what we wanted, what we wished we had. And it's been pretty awesome to see it come to life and to see these men and women make these communities and have that support around them.
What were some of your initial goals?
I think the initial goals was, again, to have that community and to limit some of the isolation. We weren't as focused on how to support the kids. It was more about being understood differently. Lots of people do want to try and help and do want to support, but they just don't get it. And I would have been one of those people before my husband died. I would have been one of those people that would have been like, call me if you need anything, or if I saw them 6 months, a year down the road and they were struggling, I would wonder why. So it's not necessarily a fault of the people that are trying to support. But when you say, my kids are driving me crazy, or I wish, or, whatever statement it is, and when you're in a room of people and the heads are nodding in agreement with you, there's power in that. And it's a beautiful thing. So initially it was just to have that community and that understanding around the other widowed parents.
So what are some of the things that Hummingbird does for young widowed parents?
Sort of our signature program, we call it our Legacy Academy program. There's lots of barriers for parents to come to group, whether it's finances for a babysitter or location, or your child's just attached to your leg and doesn't want you to walk out the door. So a lot of our programs are offered virtually to limit that barrier. So these groups meet on a monthly basis. It's a bit of a drop-in basis. You can come and pick the topics that you want to, but it's all about providing a bit of education and then that opportunity to chat and discuss and vent on what's happened in the past few weeks, or seeking words of wisdom from other people that might be a little farther along in their journey and can offer words of wisdom back. And we have a group specifically for dads, and that's pretty cool because they have their own, men and women are different. It's the great statement of the year, right? But they come with their own different challenges, and it's neat that we can offer that group facilitated by dads for dads. So it's kind of cool.
You mentioned the power of talking to someone else who kind of understands. We had done an earlier interview, And we talked to somebody about a walking through grief program where people who lost their partners meet up at a park and they walk. And she was saying that what she hears from those people is, even though lots of people try and help and lots of people are empathetic, they don't get it. Now just being able to talk to someone else who kind of gets it, just that ability makes a difference. And it sounds like that's what you were talking about as well.
Mm-hmm. There's great power in peer support. We're part of a community of support or a village of support that families need. And there's a time and a place for professional, but our support is peer. And when I meet a new family or meet a new parent and I talk to them, I can literally hear the relief in their voice that they're talking to somebody that does get it, right? And feels more understood and has that freedom to say those statements that other people might think, they're crazy to say, right? And I always joke there's a difference between love and like. We love our children, but some days we don't like them. And that's not something you can say to everybody without judgment, right? We would do anything for them, but you need to leave me alone right now because mama's losing her marbles, right?
In terms of logistics, where is Hummingbird located? How can people find it? And what kind of resources does it offer if they do find you?
So technically we're located in Kitchener-Waterloo, but because of the virtual aspect of our supports, we have widowed parents that join us coast to coast and within the States. And one of our groups is designed for the West Coast time zone to help with that. We're on social media where we have our own website of Hummingbird Centre for Hope, and resources. We certainly offer education around children's grief. We refer out to a lot of different places because if the kids do need some extra support or want a group of their own, we have lots of places we can refer to, and then agencies even within the States that can help them find geographically what's around them. So we try and be that central point that we can offer information out to whatever the parent needs.
Our interviews fly by. They're only 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. There's a question that we ask every guest, but before I turn to that question, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about Hummingbird?
When we founded it, our goal was to help one parent, and it's pretty cool that we've helped a lot. And it's just so neat to see these families go from this, where the worst thing has happened, where their spouse has died, where their children's parent has died, sort of in their worst spot. And it's so cool to walk alongside them in the journey and see these successes that happen and see the growth that happens. I was invited to a wedding of one of the kids of one of our Hummingbird families, and it was just so cool to see this whole transition and this whole growth and this beautiful moment, and to be included in that was super humbling and super, super grateful to be a part of their journey.
I look around sometimes and I see people doing things and it just amazes me. Someone like you who went through an experience and wished they had resources. And then when you had a chance, you set up those resources. It's really quite amazing. So we thank you for that. And for anyone listening who may know somebody who could use your help, it's great for them to have the opportunity to contact Hummingbird. Mm-hmm. Our podcast is about many areas of wellness. And we ask every guest the same question in a context where we can't take care of them all at any given time. We essentially do a mini wellness check-in. So the question is, are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you think of even one thing you could do to foster wellness in that area?
Right. First thing that comes to mind, and I'm looking at your little graphic on the screen here, is the artistic side of it, or the creative side. I used to be quite creative in my younger days, and Christmas is always a time where I can see it come back to life because the ornaments and everything I've done are, being pulled out of boxes. And it's definitely been on the back burner to spark that creativity in me again. And, just within the past 2 weeks, I've tried to make a conscious effort to do something creative every day, whether it's writing or even doodling, just something to try and cultivate that spark again. And I've been pretty good at it the past 2 weeks. Ask me again in a month, we'll see where I'm at. But I think it's important that we, utilize our brains in different ways. And that creative part is something that I've missed and looking forward to hopefully fostering it back into daily life.
When I was trying to think about the categories of wellness that make a difference in my life, as I was putting together that list and put art on it, I was shocked because I'd never thought about art and wellness before. But then when I actually think about some of the things that calm me down the most, that help me when I'm hurting a lot, so much of it is art, music, or whatever. And so good luck with that, because I really do believe that art is a crucial component of wellness and can really help contribute both to our imagination and helping us create new things, but also that kind of calming effect that we connect. So good luck with that, Marny.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. So, yep.
Well, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate what you're doing and for talking to us tonight.
Again, thanks for having me.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of the Adventures of the Starving Artist, Industry Night. It's a staple in certain industries, especially as we approach things like the holiday season, where most of us who work in a service sort of job, whether you're working in a restaurant or a musician in my case, of course, a lot of times you don't get the same time off as people in different jobs. You know, if someone wants to take their family out for a holiday meal, someone's got to be there to do the cooking and the serving and all that stuff. So an industry night is really important because it gives all of those people a chance to unwind and have a night out themselves, right? Now, in the music world, this is no exception, especially this time of year, given holiday gigs. Many of us are really, really amping up gigs, and we're running around like crazy. Not that that's any different from any other time of year, but it can be a little complicated because, of course, we're still people. Although sometimes it doesn't feel like it, but we are. And sometimes, you know, you're being pulled in 1,000 directions at once between friends and family inviting you out to gatherings. Plus, you've got gigs to do. In my case, there's the lesson thing to mix in as well, and the management thing in the daytime. So it's just lots of stuff happening. But last night, I had the opportunity to attend my very first, even though it was the 9th annual, Heart and Crown Musicians Christmas, and my goodness, it was a fun time. Basically, it's an industry night for all the musicians who play at the Heart and Crown locations here around Ottawa. So it's a pretty healthy group, and while I've interacted with most of these folks on, you know, in our group message on Facebook or whatever, so, you know, can someone cover this gig? Oh yeah, I can, blah, blah, blah. I've only ever actually met in person a handful of these folks. So I wanted to go and actually put some faces to names and that stuff and do the networking thing, etc. But also, it's just it's nice to be included in that, right? So I went out and checked it out, and it was a formal wear event, so I put on a suit and tie, which is not something that I do a lot, but here we are. And it was really nice. Got there just after lessons, and the way it worked out, they had a couple of scheduled performers going until about 10 o'clock, and then the night turns into an open jam. And as you can imagine, seeing as it's all rostered musicians, it's a group full of powerhouse players. Super fun stuff. So I got there just as the first act was wrapping up, and he was killer. Solo guy named Matt, doing his thing with the guitar, but he also had backing tracks and like pre-recorded harmonies and stuff, so it sounded like a full band, even though it was just one guy. And then another group went up, and they did some great tunes. They had a trumpet player and everything. And then my buddy Jeff went up, and I was like, "Oh, Jeff, how's it going?" He said, "Man, do you want to play with us?" So what was supposed to be Jeff and a trio turned into Jeff as a quartet, and then another guy jumped in on the other guitar, so it turned into a quintet. And it was a lot of fun, but it kept me on my toes because I had no idea what we were playing, of course, no rehearsal, etc. But also, I deduced as we were sort of sound checking that his guitar was a half step down, so I had to transpose everything another half step. So we're playing stuff in the key of like F sharp and C sharp, and for the uninitiated, that just means it's like double complicated and almost needlessly so, but it was. Anyway, we got through it. It kept me on my toes. I got to meet some musicians I hadn't formally met in person. And all in all, it was a really fun night, and I'm really glad that I remembered my earplugs, because once the night turns into an open jam and drinks are flowing, the vibes are good, it gets pretty loud. So no ringing ears for this guy. That's all from me for today. A little industry night check-in, Heart and Crown, Musicians Christmas. That's the 9th one overall in the books, my very first, and I'm looking forward to next year's already. The number 10 should be pretty sweet. Thanks very much for tuning in. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We're We're glad you're here, and we hope you're making wellness a priority. Hope you're getting something out of the podcast. And especially for people who are new, you might not know that the podcast was inspired by my book, Accidentally Well by John Webster. It's available on Amazon, Indigo, Barnes & Noble, pretty much anywhere where you can buy books online. And this is my pitch for you to buy a copy and have a read. I think it'll enhance the experience of the podcast, and it will also help us defray some costs because it's really expensive putting out a podcast. So grab a copy if you can, and in the meantime, enjoy the rest of the show.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Sheila, I have a question for you.
Okay, I'm here. Ready.
So these are some workout discussion questions.
Okay.
And it's found on printdiscuss.com, exercise conversation questions. And this question is about what is more motivating when working out? Is working out with a group or with a personal trainer more motivating for you?
Wow, because they're both quite motivating. I find having a personal trainer's attention singularly on you, wow. So, you just want to impress them and work so hard. But it's kind of cool because they ask you what you want to achieve and they ask you all these questions. And so the workout that they're organizing is also personalized for you. So I think that's awesome, especially in the situation I am in where I'm coming out of an injury and I'm trying to get better. Doing a group exercise with a bunch of people, I find that incredibly motivating too, because you're seeing all these people, they're all working out and everybody's doing, whatever they're doing. And it's inspiring to see the older ones doing so well, or the younger ones, or whatever it is. You're seeing all these different people and it's inspiring and also a little competitive, and you want to be not, the fastest or the slowest, or, I don't know if you have
want to
that.
have a good showing.
Yes.
I totally understand.
You want to have a good showing. Exactly. But when you're injured, I find that I have to be really careful, right? Because those ones aren't focused on you. So if you have that tendency, which I do, I'm a little bit competitive, I might push myself beyond what I should. So I'm a little, right now in the situation I'm at, I am a little concerned about doing group exercising just for that reason. I don't want to be pushed beyond what I can do. I have to really listen to my body. Which one do I find more motivating, did you say?
That's the question. I do think you're right, though. Both are very motivating.
Mm-hmm.
I think both have a lot of pros. So I think we can agree they're both motivating, but which would you prefer at this point in your life?
I think I would prefer the personal trainer. But the one thing that I do like about both of them is that you have set times and days. I think it's a really good idea to set activities so that you're forced to go, because sometimes you can make excuses. If you're just doing it online or just doing it at home or just going outside for a run or whatever you're doing, you can postpone or not do it at all. So I think you don't have to do this for every day, but I think it is good to have that you have to go to a class or you have to go to your personal trainer time, right? So that's what I think.
I think so too. I love the idea of a personal trainer. I've never actually had the opportunity to work with one. But I love the idea that they would take the guesswork out of working out. Mm-hmm. So they would design the whole workout for you and you could follow along. And like you said, there would be a scheduled time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really helpful. Mm-hmm. I have worked out in group settings, so taking group classes. And I do love that you have to show up at a certain time because it really pushes you to get there on time. And I love the group atmosphere. It's great for your social wellness as well, just to see other people there. And maybe you can start creating new friendships from people who regularly attend the same classes as you. So that's amazing. But I agree. It is so important to set aside a time to do it and say, I'm doing it at this time. And sometimes it's hard, it's easy to postpone it. But something I always come back to is reminding myself of my why. Yeah. Why am I doing it at this time? And it doesn't necessarily have to be because I have to be super fit or I have to look a certain way. But I like to think of it as this is the time I'm carving out for myself to do something good for myself.
It helps in so many ways. Like, I really think it helps me sleep. I need to get my energy out. So it helps with your sleep. It helps with your skin. It helps with your personal, your social, getting out there with people. It just helps in so many ways that you do really need to think. Just remember that when you're not motivated, just remember the other things that helps. Sometimes I think don't think too much. Just go do it.
And then by the time you think about it, it's already done.
It's already done. Yeah. You finished the hard part. Yay. In terms of motivating, I think either and both are equally motivating. You need to just get out there and do it.
There's a thought. Popped up while running.
As 2023 comes to an end, it occurred to me that doing the podcast, talking to so many great guests and reading articles and chatting with co-hosts, listening to other co-hosts talking about wellness topics, I've been steadily changing my life in practical ways, in real ways. I'm doing more activities that foster wellness in different categories. And I wasn't noticing it as I went, but as I was out for a run and thinking back about the year, wow, so many positive changes. And I won't remember them all, but let me list some, and it's a pretty big list, even the ones I could remember when I was out there. So after years of not reading literature, a couple times when I asked a guest the question I ask every guest, they said that they wished they could get back into reading literature, and that made me think I'm the same way. And so then I went out and got a library card, then downloaded the Libby app, which allows me to get audiobooks onto my phone very easily. I started listening to audiobooks, and it's been wonderful. And even in the last few months, I think I've read 10 books. I found ways to get to and from work without driving my car alone. I'm biking, walking, and taking public transport. And not only is it good for the environment, but I'm enjoying it. I have more experiences, including social ones. And isn't that what life is about? Experiences. We just bought laundry detergent strips instead of liquid in a big plastic jug. Another benefit to the environment. Thanks to Andrea Lee's interviews, I'm using the right breath technique when I'm working out. And from another interview, I think more about the mind-muscle connection. So these have to do with weight workouts, and I feel better. And my workouts seem to be improved because I'm doing these things. I saw a financial planner to update my retirement plan. I'd been feeling really stressed out about that. And now I feel a bit more calm and even optimistic about what I can put in place before I retire. I had a breakthrough about my approach to wellness and my theory. Ways to achieve balance. And for example, when I was chatting with Ryan Bush and reading a draft of his upcoming book, Become Who You Are, and at the same time, I just happened to be reading Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and some concepts were kind of similar, and they came together to help me develop new ideas, which I'm really excited about and working on right now. I'm shifting my approach to food. Sheila and I are eating a little less meat and more vegetables. I'm getting pretty good at making black beans with nice flavor profiles. So I've got one that's kind of got a Mexican flavor to it, another that's got kind of an Italian flavor to it. And I love having them in the fridge to throw on something like an omelet or on a salad to have a little more protein in a healthy way. When I'm running, more and more I'm taking time to turn the music off and then just feel present in the moment. I'm trying to take in the nature around me, the smells and the sights and the feeling of the wind, basically just experiencing my surroundings. And that's making me feel more connected to the environment and to the things around me. And for some reason, I'm actually feeling more connected to the cosmos, to the universe, thinking more about things outside of myself. And then that has me also feeling more connections with people. Opportunities opened up for me. I was asked to interview former NHL player Shane Corson about his experiences with anxiety, depression, and more. And I was even able to include that interview on episodes 92 and 93 of our podcast. I was asked to do a presentation to our law association about my approach to wellness and balance. And I did that, and that motivated me to organize my thoughts and prepare a PowerPoint. I loved working on it because my concept of balance gets clearer every time I do that, and I can see myself improving that presentation and just getting a better feel for it as I go. We subscribed to our local newspaper. That was because of our interview with Mirko Petricevic. And not only do we get the entertainment of being able to read the news and learn about our community, we're hoping that by supporting local media, it helps to protect our democracy in ways. I made a whole bunch of fun photos and videos as part of the show's social media. Listening to music is probably the key activity in artistic wellness that helps me feel better. But creating with Photoshop and video software is another source of joy for me. I'm even getting pretty good at it. It's a lot of fun, and I do actually feel a bit like an artist when I'm working on it. So these are just some of the examples.
The point is that I'm following an action-based approach. I'm figuring out activities that foster wellness in different areas, and then I do those activities. And I'm checking in from time to time, especially when I feel off, to figure out whether there are activities I can bring back into the mix or to start doing to improve my balance. It's a really practical approach. And I did a lot more wellness fostering activities than the ones I've listed. Thinking about it, I think I covered all 8 categories, even in the list that I gave you. Mental wellness, physical, spiritual, economic, environmental, artistic, intellectual, and social wellness. And on the podcast side, we added Isabel Sinclair and Noor Saad as co-hosts, opening up opportunities for conversations with people at different ages and stages who are invested in wellness and can provide different perspectives. So 2023 went by fast. It was a fun, a wonderful, and productive year.
It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin.
You said before we started that you enjoyed the 100th anniversary special.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. When I was doing it, I really enjoyed the energy. But then when I was listening to it, you did such a great job editing it, and it just flowed so well. And it reminded me of how great the shows were in the past. You know, when you're doing them, you don't listen to them all the time. And I really enjoyed just going back and thinking about the different guests that we had and what they brought to the table and what people got out of it. And I thought it was really interesting how different people got different things out of it. And I enjoyed the conversation.
When you're doing the podcast, it seems like every week it's racing up. Even though we do them in advance, it's still like, okay, got to get the next one going, It's easy to lose sight of the big picture and all the things that happen along the way. I thought it was really cool because I was just mostly just sitting there listening. And I just thought it was really neat how people were pulling things together that I hadn't really pulled together in that way. Mm-hmm. How they were seeing themes that I kind of saw but kind of forgot about. And I just thought it was great. And it was a bit challenging. I mean, imagine people, you have 2 people live and 3 people on Zoom. How do you have a conversation where not everyone's talking at the same time or starting over each other? So it was quite a challenge, but I think we got a great setup going. But had you been here live, you would have seen that there were kind of some stop starts and stuff, which is easy to fix in the editing process. Still, I was blown away by how smooth that all sounded. And you guys kind of sounded like you could have your own podcast. The 4 of you talking and shooting the breeze. You're all so comfortable with each other. That's the part I really liked, how kind of it all flowed.
I really liked, because when I listen to the podcast, I don't know about everyone else, but when I listen, I'm alone, right? I'm hearing it on my headphones and I want to have a conversation. I want to actually talk. And sometimes I actually do talk to the radio, talk out loud. But it was really fun to talk about them, talk about these episodes. And I really enjoyed hearing the different opinions and the different ideas. And I thought that we had the same, like some of us, and then different, and what we got out of each episode and how people got different things out of them. So I really enjoyed it.
Another thing for me was I saw people especially in kind of Cameron's section. Mm-hmm. You know, I kind of have this image of what Cameron does. And for sure, I like a lot of the stories, his storytelling, and this crazy thing happened and, Pizza Box, that part of it. Mm-hmm. It was really cool to hear Pia and Cheryl talking about how much they liked the music kind of theory side of it and how much they're learning. And in particular, when Pia said she wouldn't have put music as one of her categories of wellness, which is to me part of art, but she does now, and largely because what she's hearing Cameron doing, that was just really amazing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was really, really awesome.
One thing that did strike me, though, it did seem like we were only scratching the surface because everybody can only say kind of one thing per session. Mm-hmm. And sure, there were some times where you could list more than one, but for the most part, people were trying to say, if I had to pick one from this, what's on your mind, or if I had to pick one from pop-up, I'd pick this one. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, we're like, wow, I mean, here we are just scratching the surface and there's so much more that was underneath. So yeah, I can imagine you guys having those conversations more regularly.
I know. I was thinking after especially when we have those guests, right? And they're giving us their knowledge or their experience or their stories. We could literally come on and have another podcast just talking about what we got out of that and what else we wanted to know about it, or just literally talk about that one guest, because there were so many guests that you had that had so many stories, and you just wanted to learn more and talk about it amongst each other. with
Well, you know
every
what?
single one, but we didn't have time.
Yeah, and I don't know that we can have. I mean, you can maybe start a new podcast talking about a podcast that talks about "Let's Be Well Together" podcast. But the other simple
that'd be a little
solution
much.
is just talk to people. Like, just find out who else is listening to the show and have conversations. That would be fantastic. But I do like the idea of maybe like a quarter one, like we call it Q1, Q2, Q3, and the kind of the world I'm in. Maybe a Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Get together with you guys and update it.
Yeah.
Hosts and listeners, and maybe do it at least once a year. That would be cool. But for sure, people can be talking about this stuff outside the podcast microphone setting.
Yeah, maybe we can go to the library and do a little.
Because the library is amazing.
Library is amazing. Yeah, so I really enjoyed hearing from Cheryl and Pia and, of course, Elise. So it was great that we all got together and got to do that. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as we did.
I guess the only downside was it just goes to show that when the listeners sound like professional co-hosts, it maybe it takes us down a peg. It just shows that anybody can do it. But thank you so much for being part of it. And I just loved it. So thanks, Sheila, for coming up with the idea too. Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
And it's sign-off time. It's Sheila here with Elise and John.
Hello.
Hi.
And I'd like to wish everyone a happy new year. Welcome to 2024. I hope everyone had a great holiday. We definitely did. We had some relaxing time, some family time, some workout time. We even worked a little bit, John and we went for walks. And then on New Year's Eve, it snowed, which was really nice. Got a lot of rain last week, so it was nice to see snow entering into 24. I just want to also comment on how much I enjoyed last week's segment, the 100th episode. It was really fun to do, but it was also really fun to listen to. Whenever I'm listening to the podcast, I'm by myself. So I want to have a conversation to people about it. Oh my gosh, what did you think of this? And it was just really fun to have that kind of interaction with all the people and hearing everyone else's comments. So thanks for everyone who participated, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. What about you, Elise?
Well, we have been enjoying our holiday. We have 2 weeks off school. So it's been really nice. Last week, we spent kind of a whole week on the road. So we were visiting you both in Kitchener, and then we headed to Columbus, Ohio, and we visited Stephen's family there, and we had a lovely trip. I think it was our best drive ever.
Nice.
The border was pretty quick. The weather was good. There were no detours. So it was a win for us. That was great. And we really enjoyed our time there. And then looking forward to this week, I have the week off again, and I'm hoping to get some jobs done that I don't normally have time to do. So a lot of organization. I know I was putting away all of the Christmas things that we got, and I'm like, oh, this cupboard's a mess and this closet's a mess. So just kind of get some things organized and just relax.
Excellent.
How about you, John?
I also had a great holiday. There's just too much to cover. It's been so long since we did a sign off, and there have been so many events. But the short version is we had a lot of great times with family and friends, so that was amazing. I also enjoyed the 100th episode special. It was really amazing, and I really appreciate people jumping in and doing that. I am getting back into the gym as well, which is great. I started a couple weeks ago. That's good because I was kind of having that anxiety about going back to the gym. I don't like making New Year's resolutions, especially in November, December, because then I tend to not do anything till the new year. So I'm glad I just started doing stuff and not as a resolution, but just part of everyday life. And I really enjoyed Sheila yesterday for New Year's Eve. We went to downtown Kitchener. There were some events going on, and I suggested we walk. And so we ended up doing the same walk I do most mornings to go to work. So now she knows the walk that I do, and I don't know why, but I like that. There's just so much to cover, but basically we're just wishing everyone a great 2024. We're going to have another great year of the podcast. That's all I got. Anybody else?
That's great. No, I'm really excited. Thanks for listening, everyone, and Happy New Year. And I hope you tune in next week. Same time, same place. That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.